This video, it's sponsored by Squarespace.
Up until very recently, the War Within has largely referred to the ongoing faction war between the Alliance and Horde. From Warcraft 1, Orcs vs Humans, to the major tree-burning, home city-destroying Alliance-Horde conflict that was the Fourth War, the battle for Azeroth has often been a battle for control between these two ever-warring factions. Except, that's not really true, is it? In Warcraft 3, members of the Alliance and Horde have to learn how to put aside their differences in order to fight a greater threat, and this is a pattern that has arguably repeated in almost every single World of Warcraft expansion since. The two factions have still managed to band together in order to protect Azeroth from a greater and more sinister threat over and over again. Whether that threat is Sargeras, Arthas, Old Gods, Deathwing, a corrupt warchief, Sargeras again, a corrupt warchief again, more Old Gods, or an enemy so terrible and effective he actually almost managed to destroy the game itself. Horde players have worked with and under Alliance heroes plenty of times before, and vice versa. And while faction pride has always been a core part of World of Warcraft's identity, the lines between the factions have blurred even further in more recent years, mostly for very practical and common sense gameplay reasons, such as wanting to be able to play and be in a guild with your friends. Because the war is no longer with each other, it's with ourselves. Within. Did you get it? Did you get it though? Oh, and of course there is a war with Xal'atath and her Nerubian army and, I don't know, cosmological horrors and the likes of which we know not what of, etc. You know, standard stuff. But the point is, we can't help but still worry about the Alliance and Horde in one particular conflict that is as old as the faction war itself. Blizzard faction bias. Are the Horde losing the War Within? Is the War Within basically an Alliance story with some Horde representation slapped on just for the sake of it? Is the expansion key art of Xal'atath's warband, consisting of 3 Alliance and 1 Horde, and even that Horde character's getting swapped out for some gnome or whatever, an accurate visual representation of Blizzard's attitude towards the factions? Well, I hate to do this, but let's put up a scoreboard and take a look. The cover art for the War Within features Alleria, Anduin, and Thrall, and right off the bat, Alliance are leading 2-1. But cover art doesn't necessarily translate to a great deal of narrative focus. See, for example, Bolvar in Shadowlands, or well-written story. See, for example, Alexstrasza in Dragonflight. So let's not get too ahead of ourselves yet, okay? Also, the release of the War Within beta came with its own cover art, with new characters on it. Our main villain, Xal'atath, very nice, we all love our evil Naifu Shadow Queen, and Jaina. Right, okay, so that's 3-1 to the Alliance. But we're not ones to judge books by their covers on this channel, so let's take a closer look at the first major story we experience in the War Within, the Leveling campaign. Now, the first 2 zones in the expansion, the Isle of Dorn and the Ringing Deeps, are largely earthen focused, so even though none of them feature in the War Within's cover art, it still makes sense that we spend a great deal of these 2 zones with the major dwarf characters that play an important role in the expansion: Moira Thaurissen, her son Dagran II, and her father Magni Bronzebeard. Other characters dip in and out, including Thrall and Jaina, dipping out more than in really, and leaving almost straight away to go organise reinforcements, which is basically just used as a narrative reason why we won't really see them again until the max level campaign. Anduin and Alleria, but for the most part the characters we really end up spending a lot of time with are these dwarves. Moira has already proven herself a natural leader and skilled, if somewhat sneaky, diplomat, and we see her putting these skills to use throughout the War Within as she helps to mediate between the Oathsworn and Unbound Earthen during the Isle of Dawn storyline, and then helps Brinth lead a successful resistance against the corrupt High Speaker during the story of the Ringing Deeps. While Dagran II, who we mostly know as a baby until now, has grown up to be a passionate scholar with a particular interest in anything to do with history, archaeology, and speaking in the loveliest, warmest, yummiest voice that any dwarf has ever had, showing that he takes quite strongly after his Bronzebeard uncles. Magni, once King of Ironforge and later Speaker of Azeroth, has been struggling quite a lot recently with a bit of an identity crisis ever since since his recent divorce. Ever since Azeroth stopped speaking to him. And the stories of these three dwarfs progresses lovingly alongside the story of the War Within. And we get to watch these characters grow and progress along their stories in a way that directly tackles their history and their relationships with each other. It's beautiful work. I love it. 10 out of 10. So, Alliance Dwarves are winning in the first round of the War Within stories. It does make sense in the context of these stories. Not only do the dwarves obviously have important links to the Earthen, but Dagran II's ancestors specifically have links to Xal'atath, who, when she was trapped inside the Blade of the Black Empire, was once possessed by Modgud Thorissen, the sorceress wife of a Thorissen so original his first names, Sorcerer, Thane, are literally just his titles. I think it's really fun that one of the weapons that drops from Grim Butthole, and has done since Cataclysm, is Modgud's blade. This is probably the dagger that Modgud abandoned when Xal'atath became her own Naifu. I just think that's fun, and since it's the only fun thing about Grim Butthole, make the most of it, I say. Xal'atath's antics back then included the creation of the original Skardin, dwarves that have been transformed by void corruption into monstrous creatures. And of course, we've seen Skardin again in the War Within. But even though narratively the dwarven focus makes perfect sense, this does still mean that when major storylines of the first two zones interact with established characters, those characters are Alliance. Even in the case of Delves. Even the solo gameplay featured Delves have a bit of an Alliance focus that the Horde just isn't getting at all. Bram fits in nicely with all this story around his family, but it still creates an undeniable imbalance. But there's still 2 zones to go in the original Leveling Up campaign, so let's take a look next at Hallowfall, which is... Oh, yeah, okay, it's mostly Anduin. Oh, and Alleria. But yeah, no, that is, in fact, Anduin's story. Hallowfall is home to the Arathi. Anduin was named for the last living Arathi that we knew of back in the Eastern Kingdoms, Anduin Lothar, and so he is understandably excited at the notion of finding a whole zone filled with his namesake's people, and even more excited when one of the major characters from the zone is Faerun Lothar, presumably a distant relative of the original Anduins. Very interesting character reveal for this about Anduin as well, because the fact that he likes Faerun Lothar and isn't offended by her very existence proves that he has never actually been on Reddit. A large part of Hallowfall's story follows Anduin as he learns everything he can about the local Arathi history and culture, helping to fight back against invading Nerubians and the weird dark void thing that's going on with Beladar. He even fights a massive flying octopus. I love the massive flying octopus. It's not all Anduin, no. We also see considerably more of Alleria, who has been dipping in and out of the main campaign from the Isle of Dorn, but tends to hang around a little bit longer now. And from the start, it's pretty clear that the storyline of Hallowfall is going to heavily focus on Anduin's story. Not only do we see him finally progress through the problems he's been having with the light for the past few years, but Faerun mentions an Arathi prophecy that just happens to coincide with one of Anduin's oldest story threads, Velen's prophecy. When Anduin was still a child, Prophet Velen saw a vision of a final confrontation between the light and the shadow. In the vision, the Alliance and Horde were united as a single army led by Anduin. As it turns out, the Arathi have a similar prophecy of a final confrontation between the light and the shadow, which they call Renilash. In Velen's prophecy, the combined Alliance and Horde forces are joined by the Naru as well as the Dragonflights, the latter tying it in neatly with the events of, well, Dragonflight. All of which is to say, Hallowfall is another win for the Alliance. On to the final leveling zone, Kahet, the Nerubian zone. Here we spend even more time with Alleria, whose entire deal is focused on chasing down Xal'atath. And in Kahet, Alleria is mostly all business. It's the zone designed to set up the max level campaign and the raid on Nerubar Palace, more than any in-depth character explanation. But still, players are taking orders mostly from Alliance characters in the zone. So when it comes to the zone storylines, that is 4 out of 4 for the Alliance. Stop right there, because we will mention that Monte Gazlowe, leader of the goblins makes an appearance in this zone, in both the main storyline and a pretty enjoyable side quest line. Gazlowe and the goblins in general getting some attention in the War Within is a refreshing and welcome development. And you know, I've just got a feeling that there might be even more to come. And you know what? After the disaster that was Gallywix's leadership, I think goblins deserve it. And then once we get to the max level campaign, we finally work with a prominent Horde member, Lillian Voss. Horde hero Lillian Voss has shown up a lot recently, helping the Alliance secure Emirjasil, helping the Alliance re-secure Gilneas. Look, we have to talk about the problems with Lillian.
My dearest friends and fiends, it is me, it's Evie, and I am here to sing the praises of Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Thank you! But also to cheer on Immortalis Argent Dawn EU as they compete in the greatest race known to gamerkind. The race to world first for guilds with a name a bit like Immortalis, otherwise known as Ritwufugunabli. Now, I want to make sure that I'm supporting my guild in every way possible, making sure their healer is fed and rested and ready for his job, training the next generation of top-tier raiders, aka my 2- and 4-year-olds. They're really good. But most importantly, making sure our raid team is prepared to the max. And that means giving them the best raid prep content on the internet, and that means embedding all the things other people have made onto our website. Yeah. So today we are putting the Squarespace embedding capabilities to the test. Last time we whipped up a frankly beautiful website, thank you, and today we are populating that site with the very best embeddable raid prep content on the web. First up, the classic YouTube video embed. I've gone and found a high tier and extremely serious take on how to be a good raider. I know this is a serious and high quality video given the title, which I'm writing out to emphasize. Second, we know Twitch is where all the high level competitive content is at. There are so many great channels and players to choose from here, so I'm just going to set up my embed block, easy, and embed a 24/7 chill lo-fi beats radio set to footage of walking around Japan. You've got to get them in the right mood. You're welcome. And finally, we all know that the best way to get good at a game is to play a completely different game. And why raid with orcs and elves when you could raid with pineapples? So let's just embed this. Now, some things are just unembeddable. It's cool, we'll just do this instead. Easy. So there you have it, the ultimate raid guide, custom tailored to my guild, full of extremely relevant embeds and some links too. It doesn't get much better than this, but if you do want to give building your own website a try, just head to squarespace.com/TaliaSinevitel, where you can enjoy 10% off your first purchase of a Squarespace website or domain, or just use code TaliaSinevitel. That's squarespace.com/TaliaSinevitel. So proud. They're gonna love it.
Historically, Lillian was neither a member of the Horde or the Forsaken. That's actually a key part of her character. Introduced during the Cataclysm revamp, Lillian's story illustrated to undead players the Forsaken principles of free choice. Lillian, horrified to discover her own undeath, rejects the offer to join the Forsaken, something she is free to do. And while she went on to come to terms with her own existence, Lillian's main motivation for a very long time was to destroy the Scarlet Crusade, and she would happily work with anyone who shared those same goals, whether Horde or Alliance. Lillian only officially joined the Horde during Battle for Azeroth. Compared to the Forsaken who were freed and given a home by Sylvanas, she just doesn't have that history. She's what you might call new undead. Someone who never quite got the whole Dark Lady watch over you kind of thing. And yet now, here she is, one of the Forsaken's main leaders, despite lacking that history and solidarity. And don't get me wrong, this could be a very good thing. The vacuum left by Sylvanas probably means the Forsaken need leaders who didn't worship her to begin with to offer a fresh perspective. Except there is one more problem with Lillian as a character, that ever-looming problem with Kalia, her obvious Alliance ties, and the tendency for people to claim that she is the rightful Queen of Lordaeron, a specifically Alliance way of looking at things. And Lillian, oh man, she just loves Kalia. They're often spending time together when she's not making besties with other important Alliance members like Chandris and Tess, that is. As for Lillian's own journey, her hopes, her dreams, we don't get to unpack any of that in this campaign. It's just more of the same, largely indistinguishable from times that we spent with her in Dragonflight. Powerful undead rogue ghost stab stab. Always fun, but still, once again, even when we do see Horde representation, it's just a little bit weaker, just a little bit more mundane and by the numbers numbers, just a little bit less fulfilling. But wait! Thrall has returned for the max level campaign. Okay, and Jaina too, but it's Thrall! And Jaina. And once again, Thrall can't help but be a bit of a minority Horde representative in a group of high-profile alliance leaders. His story with Rooktender Lufcella summoning the Storm Rooks and becoming the new Stormwood is a really lovely take on summoning the elements. The courage to do what's needed, but his role there is one purely of support. He's a vehicle for telling Lufcella's story rather than delivering any of his own. And his stay a while and listen, sit down and have a nice man-to-man orc chit-chat with Anduin at the end of the campaign is, again, a really nicely delivered bit of character development for Anduin. Because yet again, it's just Thrall excelling in his role as an emotional support orc and encouraging Anduin to talk through his never-ending daddy issues. Now, don't get me wrong, I have nothing against emotional support Thrall. It suits him. I just really wish he could have some screen time that's for him and his story and his thoughts alone. There's a really nice bit in that Stormrook storyline when you visit the newly landed Horde and Alliance recruits training up on the beach. I love this quest, not only for the spiky anti-the-other-faction banter between Tyrallion and Overlord Gayara. She calls you a lackey who's come to polish Tyrallion's armor. And she's right, because I did though. But also for the sheer joy of seeing huge swathes of Horde forces assembled on the beach, tooting their proverbial horns. I literally just stood among the trolls and cheered for a bit. It felt so good. There were trolls! Half a point for the Horde here, if only for Gayara making me lol. And of course, beyond the game, we've had 5 new short stories as well, focusing on Alleria, and by extension, Arator and Tyrallion, Anduin, Gazlowe, Moira, and Thrall. So even here, there's an obvious imbalance, 3-2 to the Alliance, and that balance only gets worse as you look a little bit closer. The Alleria short story shows Arator living in Silvermoon, a Horde capital city where he is visited quite easily by Tyrallion, current acting High Regent of the Alliance. This setup in the short story doesn't make no sense. When Alleria and Tyrallion left through the Dark Portal, Silvermoon was still very much an Alliance city. In fact, when they first returned, the city even allowed Alleria to visit the Sunwell, only kicking her out afterwards due to her void powers turning out to be a threat. But even then, the issue is her association with the Void, not with the Alliance. Even though Tyrallion is shown in the War Within max level campaign to still largely mistrust the Horde, he probably struggles to view Silvermoon as really fully Horde. Part of him probably still sees elves as natural members of the Alliance. In the same way, Silvermoon has little argument with Tyrallion specifically. He was once a friend and wasn't even around when all the problems that caused the rift between the Alliance and the Blood Elves happened in the first place. But again, these blurred lines are showing that the Horde don't even have full emotional possession of every one of their own cities. From a narrative and in-game perspective, Silvermoon is still treated as just a little bit Alliance. Now, of course, this has only been the opening weeks of the War Within. There's still time for later story and patches to turn quite a lot of this around. For one thing, for the first time, we already know the next expansion and the expansion after that, and we know that Midnight is going to involve a Silvermoon revamp. And so we can probably expect at least the Horde's elves to play a front and center role, right? Still, if there's one thing the War Within's Alliance bias is highlighting, is that there's a bit of a crisis in Horde identity at the moment, particularly when it comes to leadership. A string of disastrous war chiefs followed by a series of, let's face it, fairly uninspiring councils has left the Horde without a whole lot to rally behind. Even Thrall, once so Horde he bleeds red, he does, you know what I mean, has been a bit too wishy-washy, a bit too often to really feel like he could ever be the sort of strong and unifying leader who once led his people across an ocean to carve them out a home. The Forsaken have lost Sylvanas, the Trolls Vol'jin. No one who has stepped into their place has ever quite lived up to the role. The Blood Elves feel like they're flirting with the Alliance yet again and could potentially take the Nightborn with them. Weirdly, only the Goblins are getting anything like a bright future, with the disastrous leadership decision that was Gallywix finally fixed with a choice so obvious it's really amazing it took this long for Gazlowe to be offered the role. Really, Thrall, what were you thinking? He was right there all along before World World of Warcraft even started, Thrall, and you chose Gallywix? You saw Gallywix enslave his own goblins, and you still made him leader. He was your guy, was he, Thrall? What were you thinking, Thrall? Ultimately, despite the collective crisis, we would really like to see the Horde rally and find its feet once again, preferably in a way that doesn't involve invading another planet or burning down any big trees, but also one that doesn't involve being gradually surrounded by more and more Alliance until the Horde has just been absorbed into the Alliance in every meaningful way. Just maybe some nice Horde stories about Horde characters who don't actually have to hate the Alliance, but maybe could have a few more friends in the Horde than they do the Alliance, maybe, I don't know. In short, more Gazlowe. Just give us more Gazlowe and Goblin content and all is forgiven, Blizzard. Maybe a Horde character as your companion in Delves next patch. Maybe a bit more exploration of the amazing looking Haranir, an eventual allied race for the Horde. Not every new race has to be cross-faction, you know? Let's get back to shouting, for the Horde, instead of for the Horde, please? But what do you think? Have the Horde been skipped over in the War Within so far? And is that a problem, or is it okay? Maybe you're holding out for the Kel'Thalas fun times in Midnight. Let us know in the comments below. And thanks for joining us today. If you like this video, don't thank us, thank our patrons who give us their actual real life money to make all of our work happen. And guys, seriously, thank you, because without you, there would be a whole lot less Taliesin and Evertel. Thanks also to our co-writer for this episode, Discordian Kitty, who now has a whole WoW lore-focused YouTube channel and podcast all of her own. There are links in the description below. If you didn't like it though, downvote the shit out of it. And remember, my name is Redbot Spoiler Bot. You can buy your Redbot Spoiler Bot plushie now, also in the links below. Don't confuse that link with Discordian Kitty's page though. You can't buy her, but you can buy this, and you should buy this. My name is Taliesin from me and Evertel and Redbot. Cheerio.